This is the Serial at Midnight podcast. Hey guys, welcome to the Serial at Midnight podcast. My name is Heath Holland. I'm going to tell you guys I have recorded this introduction about 10 times because this is a hard one to set up. This is a hot button topic, right? The idea of gatekeeping in fan communities, like, it's not new. We've all, I think, been the victim of gatekeeping, and I think if we're being honest, we've all been on the other side of it too. And I catch myself doing these things sometimes. You know, I'm being vulnerable and honest. Wheel of Fortune, the game show on TV, has just wrapped up a week of Star Wars. It's like the Star Wars themed week where every contestant was supposed to be, they're like, "This is a Star Wars fan." And they had their lightsabers. They're like, "I named my daughter Leia," you know, that kind of a thing. And I was like, well, these people, I said this crap came out of my mouth. I said to my family, I'm like, well, they say they're Star Wars fans, but could any of these people name the bounty hunters from The Empire Strikes Back? It doesn't matter if they can, that's not helping fandom. So it's this idea of like, well, you gotta prove yourself. If you are a fan, are you a true fan? You know, I made a video about this about a month ago on YouTube called The True Fan Dilemma. This is what it was about. It's like, okay, you're a fan, but are you a true fan? Prove yourself. And thousands of you guys told me that you identified with that, you saw. And as fandom continues to evolve, we've got to make room for the new fans, or else our fandom is dying. People should be allowed to enjoy stuff the way they want to enjoy it. But I think a lot of us are hardwired for this, like, you know, you gotta pass the quiz. And so when I started thinking of doing this as a podcast idea, I saw Nadia Robertson, who's the co-founder of 1931 Productions. They've done a lot of horror stuff. She works in film, and she is a respected, valuable voice in the fan community. And even like the heads of some companies, physical media labels and distributors, they're following Nadia to see what she thinks about things. She's a really valuable part of fandom. But people, when she would share her opinions on social media, repeatedly, multiple people would say, no, you don't understand. You're doing it wrong. And just gatekeeping for no apparent reason other than this looks different from what I think. You're wrong. So I wanted to reach out to her and have her on Serial at Midnight so she could share some of these experiences. And honestly, so I could have a conversation about it with like, I wanted to do this without anger. I wanted it to not be confrontational. This is a fun conversation, but it does get real. I'm telling you, about 10 minutes in, it gets real. So buckle up. This is a meal of a conversation. I mean, this is like a 6-course meal. There's so much to talk about and think about here. But I want you to know, I think it's in service of a kinder, better, more welcoming fandom that's growing and not shrinking. And I think at the end of the day, that is what we all want. We don't want fandom to be dead. We don't want to be like, well, I remember when I was a fan of toy trains before all of these video games. Like, we want things to grow and evolve, right? So that's what this conversation is. Listen, I've talked enough. Without further ado, Nadia Robertson, prove yourself. The gatekeeping in fandom. It's interesting, right? Like, what is up with this, with people spoiling things because they know, like, nobody wants to have something spoiled for them. Is it a power thing? Is it just an insensitivity thing? I don't know.
Like, it could be a little of column A and B, I think. Like,
Yeah.
depends per person, honestly. I think some people enjoy, speaking of gatekeeping, I think they enjoy
Mm-hmm.
being the gatekeeper of that information in
Yeah.
terms of like being the first one to like be in on the scene. Like, there's some like, reporter, something that it's their, I don't know, it's their
Yeah.
like self-anointed duty to be the releaser of this information. And it's like, dude, it's like aired streaming, like, it's not something news you have to break,
Yeah.
like, people clearly are interested in this, looking forward to this, want to see it, but people have kids, they have jobs, they have lives, like, you have to account for that. And when
Mm-hmm.
people don't, it's just, to me, really inconsiderate of just, not everyone is like on your schedule, or maybe they want to watch something else and they're going to put that off. It doesn't mean that they're like less of a fan of it. They just may have something else they need to do that night, or,
Mm-hmm.
Value more that day or whatever. It doesn't mean that they're not like real fans because they didn't catch it like as it aired that night, especially in the world
Yeah.
of streaming. Like, a lot of shows don't even do that anymore, where they release things on a weekly basis. It's kind of a little bit more rare that you
Right.
actually have television that makes you wait per episode, like back in the old days. So, if you have everything that streams immediately in terms of like a whole season that gets dropped, then you have to really consider that too, because or a whole season drops. That's a whole chunk of time you got to sit and devote to, and can't sit down until over the weekend to catch up to this whole season. Now someone's like take it upon themselves to just like expose everything.
Okay, so you just said something. I noticed like with the new season of something that's really high profile here, but like by the time I'm up and drinking coffee or whatever, someone has apparently watched the whole thing already. I'm like, did you really? Or did you just like watch it on double speed so you could be the one that's like breaking off? To your point, there is something that seems to be it's like a power of like, I'm the one breaking the news. Like everybody wants to be first. They want to be the one to plant the flag in the thing. And I guess it is gatekeeping. It is kind of an entry to our conversation here, which is interesting.
Because you're like the person at the gate of the show or movie or info, the like sentinel that is like guarding the spoiler or whatever. And it's within your power to release that information. It's like you saw it first, so you get to be the one standing there like, oh yeah, you got to catch up to me. Like I think it's worse in the world of social media because it's not just a pure ego, like psychological thing anymore. It's also geared around social media presence and getting those clicks. Like if you're the first person to break any kind of news or information about any kind of media, then, you're the one that's going to potentially go viral or get shared 100 times or, whatever you posted. So I think that unfortunately has now played a part where it's not just like a personal thing just because you're excited and, you want to tell people about it for whatever reason. It's also, can be largely in part because, you're wanting to expand your social media, like outreach.
Like everybody wants to be the first. They want to be like in this 24-hour news cycle where you are rewarded for being first because you're the one that may go viral with it. I think that there's this benefit that people aren't thinking about necessarily the negative consequences of their actions. They're just thinking about, I want to be first. I want this attention. And and that can cut a lot of different ways too. And it can lead to, I made a video for my YouTube channel I think it was about a month ago, and I didn't call it gatekeeping. I called it something else. I called it the true fan dilemma because there's so many, I'm a true fan. And, but it was about gatekeeping. And I think that maybe gatekeeping is not always intended to keep other people out. I think sometimes it's a sense of identity. It's a sense of like, if I forget to reference this shirt, something happened.
I love your shirt, by the way.
Thank you. Something happened while I was wearing this shirt in the grocery store of all places. So I want to tell you that story. And it's kind of about gatekeeping too. Well, I'll launch into it. I'm going to save it because the reason I wanted to talk to you is that you posted something on Facebook that it rang so true to me. You were talking about, do you want to paraphrase it? I don't necessarily want to tell you what your post was. You want to tell people kind of the gist of what your post was about?
I mean, yeah, just basically, I feel that there's this expectation where people want, like, project their own interests and whatever they value on other people. And so that becomes like this litmus test, like for judging others according to like your own experiences and what you've seen. Mm-hmm. And so you're sort of like the center of, I guess, the universe in that way, where people revolve around your idea of, what's considered good or bad. And people say these things in ways that aren't just their opinions. They say it in a way that almost states it as factual. And if you've had any different life experience that doesn't match that to like line up with their worldview, or you even have a different opinion, it can very easily turn south, where all of a sudden it's almost like your self-worth is judged upon whether or not you saw something or not. And
self-worth. Yes.
And it goes both ways, because clearly they're putting their own self-worth on these sorts of fandoms and media they consume, because they wouldn't be so personally offended if you if that wasn't a part of your life, if you hadn't seen it yet, or you didn't like it or didn't want to see it, it would just be, to me, this or check this out, or to recommend, to encourage, to include. There's enough room in the sandbox for all cinephiles. And with so many different films and genres and eras throughout time, and you can't expect people to have just seen every movie, read every comic book, watched every show, played every video game. It's just unrealistic and absurd. And to judge others based on their other interests, just because someone likes to do X, Y, and Z, and maybe they don't watch as many movies or play as many video games, that doesn't make them, less of a person. Or if they self-describe themselves as nerds, it doesn't make them less of a nerd than you are because they haven't seen something or don't like something or just simply don't see something the way you do. Because I've even seen it where people have seen the same stuff and they just don't see it the same way, and that already counts them off as not a real fan because they have a different perspective. So basically, I was just getting fed up and sarcastic, being like, well, I guess growing up, I shouldn't have gone outside to play or play sports or have any other interests that wasn't doing whatever I needed to do to be deemed as worthy and be seen as a real fan, in today's modern world. Mm-hmm. And it's just ridiculous that to even have to feel that way, to feel regret over choices you made in your life that really enrich you and make you more well-rounded. I mean, it's only, to me personally, better for anyone to do a wide variety of things. I don't think it's even if you were the most erudite film connoisseur in the world ever in time, if that's all you do, then that's not good. That's a myopic, limited life experience. And I've, quoted him before on this, but Werner Herzog said, for instance, if you want to make movies, don't watch movies, read books. And he's also harped on, even in his own life experience, he's certainly not just sat behind a computer, lost in escapism, or not really living his own life. He's the kind of person that has gone out there and has been part of things and experienced things and done things. And that life experience gives you a broader perspective in which then you can interpret whatever media you do watch, because the larger perspective you have, the greater, way that you can sort of absorb something and see it in all different ways. So to me, it's only a good thing if you've done other stuff other than classic nerddom things, because it gives you an avenue, psychologically, emotionally, whatever, to be able to relate to the things you are watching or reading about or whatever, because maybe you've done that thing or you've experienced that thing, and you wouldn't have that relation if you're a shut-in doing nothing but solo reading or, watching, whatever. A lot of that stuff too is stuff you do alone. And I would say cinema does, especially theatrically, which is now changing in the world of streaming, you don't necessarily have that community involved in these things anymore. You've got a bunch of games and stuff on these systems that, yes, you can join communities and play with each other, but there's a lot of one-person games that people just play on their own and they don't interact with anyone else. Some people use gaming as a very strong community for them to connect to, but others use it as a means of kind of just shutting the door and turning off the real world and just diving into something that's not real, just so they can take their mind off of the shit they got to deal with in real life. And that's fine. But if that's all you do, then I think it's kind of hypocritical to get onto someone who has actually, I don't know, gone out the house and done things in their life. And I just think you put yourself on a pedestal when you're the one who's actually the limited person. I wouldn't normally say that, but if we're just coming down to it, that's what it, to me, that's what it is. I have more respect for someone who maybe has consumed less of this nerd media, but has actually gone out and done things and traveled and met people and talked to people. I think a lot of this too is substituting real life interactions with human beings instead of, oh, I'm in love with so-and-so on this show and I'm so into this thing or whatever. And it's that's cool, but those characters don't need to be the only people in your life. So I don't know. It's a hot topic for me, because it wouldn't even matter so much if the people who thought this weren't the loudest voices in the room. And like when I made that post, I had several people being like, well, you just care too much about what others think, or just ignore them. And I know that the just ignore them is a little more like innocuous, where they're just trying to be like, you do you, girl. It's cool. I know that's what they generally mean, but I would say, especially as a guy, which most of it was guys saying that stuff, it's a lot easier for guys in this like gatekeeping fandom world to just blow off, because they're not being challenged in the same way, for sure, that women in the nerd culture are. You can't wear a shirt, post something, say something, whatever, without at least one person coming in and challenging you on it, or talking to you in a way that makes it seem like you don't understand whatever it is, and they have to like explain it to you so that maybe you can get on the right side of the fence with the thinking. And it's like, no, I understand it, I just don't I don't interpret it the same way as you do, and that's okay. That's why we post this stuff and have a dialogue in hopes of like everyone involved expanding their view on it, not just I post this something and if you either agree with it or not, and if you disagree with me, to like make sure that I've like educated you on whatever this property is, whether it's like the post was Batman versus Superman that initially I posted before, and then got some responses that made me even make that other post. And I've had some folks literally like describe to me Batman and Superman in like very general ways, not being like, well, in this specific comic, this happened, and so I was expecting this to see this out of the movie because I was hoping for maybe something a little more original to the original IP stuff. I get that. That's fine. But I wrote a fairly long like analysis, of my thoughts on this movie. So to me, if you were to see that, it's clear that I don't have like just a very basic level of these characters. Like I understand them enough to not need someone to explain to me like very generally what these characters are, like not even specific stuff that maybe I wouldn't have read in a comic yet. Well, Batman, he's a synopsis on the back of any Batman movie. It's like, yeah, I get that. Thank you for spending probably 30 minutes typing this.
So I was one of these guys. I was the Star Wars kid in the 90s that wore this. I wore the Return of the Jedi t-shirt when it wasn't cool, and I got super picked on for that. And it's like, there are people like me who feel like that because they went through that, everybody has to go them. And it is, and maybe that's a good and a bad thing. Sidebar. I know a guy that I used to work with, and he was wearing an Iron Man shirt one day. Or it was either Iron Man or Batman. I can't remember which one, but I was like, hey, that's a cool shirt. And he was like, it's okay. And I was like, huh? And he was like, if it was a Batman shirt, he said, he's no Iron Man. And if it was an Iron Man shirt, he said, he's no, it was what he was like, this character's not as cool as this other character. I was like, why are you wearing the shirt? He was like, it's just a shirt. And that bothered me as the guy that really paid the price wearing that, because do you know that in Iron Man issue, 166 from 1970, like, I never want to be that guy. We need people coming in that enjoy this stuff. I want to share it, and I want fandom to grow and to enjoy things. But when identity comes from fandom, it becomes really complicated, because it does feel, it just feels like you want it to be a very small community that's closed off to new members. And things happen like what you're talking about. And it's sad and it's scary.
I do remember going back to what you were saying about the t-shirt. It was 15 years ago. And I went with a friend and my not yet husband at the time. And we traveled from Birmingham to Atlanta, and we're going to drive. It was like, I think to see a Silver Screen Spook Show, maybe. I'm trying to remember. It was so long ago. I think we were going to go see, I don't know if it was Godzilla GMK. I don't know. I have to think about that. But
yeah,
I had a shirt you could get. It's like blue with the logo. That's it. And I happened to wear it, and we were in line for the screening, and someone comes up to me and um he was doing like magic tricks or something. So I guess he was
Oh,
like,
Atlanta. That's so Atlanta. No, I'm just kidding.
ah, like he came up to me and he said something, which again is so long ago, I couldn't even tell you what it was he referenced, but obviously it was something to do with either Superman specifically or the Justice League. But I like, honestly, for one, I don't remember what he said. And at the time, like, if you're talking to people and someone randomly comes up to you and says something, you're not necessarily even going to hear what they said. Like, I think I was just kind of like, huh? Like, I don't even think like heard him. And I remember he said something like, "Oh, fake fan," and kind of like went like, "Oh," at me, something along
What?
those lines. Yes, and like called me out in front of my date and my friend, both guys. I was the only girl, so I think I wonder too if that had something to do
That's
with.
it does for sure. Yeah.
And it's like, come on, dude! Like this is a shirt that is sold now. Like this was probably before they were even more widely distributed than they are now, like in Target and Walmart at the mall, whatever, something, maybe is where you
Hmm.
may more likely get something like that back then. But now you could like literally anyone could wear that shirt. Like, are you going to go up to some 6-year-old who's wearing literally the same shirt and be like, whoa, fake fan? It's like, what? Like, like supposed to, for one, like acknowledge you, like you're some stranger coming up and coming into our conversation.
Right.
And so because I don't give you my attention and like start talking to you and engaging with you, you're gonna just dismiss me. It's like, I
Yeah.
didn't even hear you, bro. Like, you just coming up in here and like saying something like, yeah, I don't even know what you
Right.
said to me. So it's like, you're just gonna, I don't know, that was embarrassing and upsetting. And it took a while, like just one of those things that like pops in your head every now and then. And you're like,
Yeah.
that guy.
Yeah.
But like on the flip side, and I have seen, like, for instance, I went to a concert and it was in between sets. And this guy was with a friend, I guess, and he had on a Cub shirt. And some other guy with his friend kind of like passed by him and saw it. And he said something, Cubs really like, whoa, whatever. And the guy like didn't know what he was talking about and seemed confused. And I even might have been like, huh, or whatever. And the guy was kind of like taken aback who did it. And he was like, oh man, I just got it at Goodwill. And it's like, and the guy who had initially said something was like, oh, okay. And he didn't say anything else. He didn't like call him out on it. He didn't challenge him. He didn't have any like snarky commentary. He was just kind of like, oh, okay. And he did seem confused, but it wasn't like judgy confused, like making faces. It was just like genuinely kind of seemed like, oh. And,
Yeah.
you would assume, like, to me, that's a situation where if someone's wearing a sports team shirt, I would assume they're a fan of that team. And so, like, for instance, if I see someone wearing a Elephant Alabama A shirt, Alabama fans, you walk by them, they go, Roll Tide. That's
Yep.
just like almost saying that's tantamount to, hey there, how you doing?
That's
Like
right.
literally, there's a commercials, SEC commercials that play during football season where they've done a spot where it was literally Alabama fans and like it was like at a wedding, at a funeral, at a birth, like any kind of technically kind of inappropriate situation, Alabama fans
Mhm.
would be like, Roll Tide when they see each other. So it was like
Yeah.
a whole parody commercial. So it's like I would say that to someone who had an Would I judge them? No. Would I take it upon myself to like walk up to him and be like, so why are you wearing that shirt? You're not an Alabama fan? Oh, well, if you're an Alabama fan, tell me, list all the coaches they've had throughout their history, or tell me the stats of this random game I'm going to pull out of my ass. It's like, I understand kind of being a little caught off guard because that to me is just a general assumption. I personally don't wear stuff. Like I wouldn't wear a Star Trek shirt unless I was a Trekkie. That's just me. But I'm not going to like think someone's dumb because they wear, I mean, I do think it's a little odd. I do think it's kind of confusing myself.
Mhm.
I just don't know why you would, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes people have siblings and they just pick a shirt out of laundry and they just roll with people wear. Like I literally just threw this on I'm like, when you said cats, I was like,
You don't
oh
even
yeah,
like cats. You hate cats.
yeah.
No.
Do you even own cats, bro? Like,
Hey, how many? And how long have you
yeah.
had
How
it?
many? How many? What food do you feed them, huh? What bet do you take them at? You're not.
A
Oh,
cat
oh,
is an animal that's kind of like a dog. It's really small. I don't know if you know this, but cats are kind of hard to take care of. They go back to like ancient Egyptian times. Yeah. Do you explain what a
oh.
cat is to you?
Yes, it's like, oh, you feed your cat fancy feast. Oh, no, you're not a real cat owner. But yeah, I honestly, when that happened at the concert and that whole exchange, I just thought it was so interesting because, and I don't want to make assumptions because I don't like to make assumptions about other people's prejudice or whatever, because that too can be kind of a slippery slope when you
Yeah.
start assuming that certain people would take issue with certain things, just generalizing too much. But
Yeah.
like, I just have a feeling that if that situation and it was a girl wearing a Cub shirt, now, maybe that guy is just generally cool and is not like one of these people that's like, name 3 songs, for the band shirt. Maybe he would have had the same reaction regardless of gender. But you never know, like the way things are. If that were a woman and that same exact thing happened, someone easily could have been like, you're not a Cubs fan. Why are you wearing that shirt? Like they would at least have something to say about it. If not, like all of a sudden come on with like a barrage of Cubs questions to see like how much of a fan she is, because like
Yeah.
I actually had a guy, and I think probably more than one person, but I just remember there was one specific guy because he was like so adamant about this, but he like literally said that it was like basically that he was entitled and it was like his right to actually approach people in a store or anywhere, and if they're wearing a Star Trek shirt, to like quiz them on it. And I'm thinking, how do you like go through life like that, man? Like, I don't know how you haven't been like, someone hasn't like checked you in some way, because and also like that's just like so miserable. Like, how do you can't go out and enjoy things because you're scanning the crowd for someone who maybe could be a poser, that now you got to get all riled up to go over there and march over and be the the fandom police. It's like, guys, no one made this your job. Like, no one did a job interview to make you the fandom police. This is something that you just decided to do because, and again, where does that get you ultimately? Like, to me, it just estranges you from the community. Because if, let's say that like a girl is wearing a band, thinking about, what she's going to cook that night for her family, whatever, maybe when a stranger comes up to her and like starts talking to her about this and asks her to name 3 freaking songs, it's kind of like those talk shows where they go around, the city, and they ask people questions about world, US history or whatever, or like, name the, branches of the US government or something, some seemingly like easy answer. But when you're like in the moment or caught off guard, you're like, oh, it's like maybe someone does know the 3 bands, but your strange random ass coming up to them, surprise them, because it's happened to me before. I had an interview years back with Sega at one point, and it was going to be for, so I can't remember, it was like the exact role. It was like kind of like a creative role in terms of like storytelling stuff there. Like it would have been maybe sort of like just like a creative position in a department. So I went into my interview, and for one, I'll say when I left that interview, I was like, I don't want this job. it was like a rough work environment there, I will say. But like just from the interview, it was kind of like, and the guy kind of did the same thing to me, the interview guy. Like, I told him that I was a really big Godzilla fan, and he kind of looked at me and he was like, okay, what's the production company that produced Godzilla? And like the studio or whatever he asked. And I just remember I was so in like interview mode that a question like that really threw me off. Yeah. And I had a second where I was like, and at that point, it was around 2014. So the legendary Warner Brothers one came out, and that's just what immediately came to mind. And I was just like, I was like, legendary Warner Brothers, and he was like, no, Toho. And I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, of course. Like, and then like literally that same year or the year before, my husband and I had actually been on Nippon TV, like for a Godzilla segment on some Japanese show that aired in Japan. And so we were like chosen out of however many people, in the US to like be a part of this Godzilla themed segment of this show. So clearly I know it's freaking Toho, and I know all that. But, in that moment, I was like a deer in headlights, just, totally couldn't answer. And it has like haunted me for like, 10 years almost. Cause it's like, God, obviously Toho, but it's like, I don't know. It just happens. And that doesn't make me less of a Godzilla fan because I couldn't remember Toho on the spot. And I feel like a lot of these people online kind of operate like that. Like it's, for one, I knew he meant women because he just like, it was that kind of attitude that I just, and again, I hate to like generalize stuff, but there are just certain people you can tell it's like geared mainly towards women. And then these same people will complain that there's not enough like cool chicks out there. It's like, because you chased them off, it's like they're out there. It's just like they're not cool enough for you. I don't know. It's like, to me, that's an opportunity. Like if someone shares any general interest with you and you like them as a person, that's an opportunity for you to now share something you love with them and vice versa. And that can only be a good thing that would bond you two, either as friends or maybe more or whatever. That's like only a good opportunity to build something with this person. Whereas if they already know it, then okay, that's cool. You might be able to have a conversation with them about it more in depth up front, but it's not necessarily the same as being there someone's first time watching something. Like to me, speaking of like, we talked about spoilers earlier, someone who hasn't seen the original Planet of the Apes right now is like a diamond in the rough, unless they're young and, whatever, they're just getting into whatever kind of movies. But like, if you're of a certain age and you haven't seen a movie like that, if I hear that, it's like, what? It's not like, what? You haven't seen that? Are you even a cinephile, dude? Like, can you even, be a film critic, dude, or whatever?
You're not even trying.
Yeah, you're not like, what have you been doing all your life? To me, that's just like, whoa, you're extinct. And there's really like one left. It's like that kind of excitement. You're like, oh my God, I didn't think you existed. And it's a good thing because then maybe you get to be the person. And that's, I guess, a positive kind of gatekeeping where you're like the gatekeeper of this thing, not in a way where you're blockading it and like guarding it and whatever. But it's like, oh, I'm going to be the avenue in which you like experience this for the first time. And that's a connection now you make with that person. And so many, like so many of these people close themselves off to that opportunity because instead of like joining them in the joy of that experience, they're now judging them on it. And not just judging them, but like literally, like we were saying earlier, like deeming their actual self-worth on it. And it's like, no, these women are out there. You just, eschew them from the conversation. It's like they want to join, but like there have been lots of instances where it's not an issue, but like people online, I don't actually know. There have been many times I've seen stuff that I would want to say something to, but hesitate because I'm like, bro, I'm too tired to even get into that can of worms today, because then, it's just going to be like, moths to a flame, like, just coming in at you like daggers from all angles. And it's like, I don't even want to like potentially get into that. So oftentimes I don't join a conversation that could maybe lead to something interesting. It could lead to someone suggesting a movie I haven't seen or vice versa, or just like some interesting perspectives or whatever. And now a whole dialogue that maybe could have happened that could have been educational for everyone all around doesn't even get to exist out of fear of retaliation for not being a true fan. And honestly, it doesn't even matter how much, like you're talking about the Batman versus Superman post, that thing could have been like, I don't know, 200, 500, 1,000 extra words. It could have gone into like the most detailed stuff. But because, and I'm talking about specifically about the movie, but because I admitted that I haven't read a lot of these comics, that I have read some Batman and Superman, but I haven't read a lot. Like, there's so many comics that I have yet to read that I want to. And that's the thing, I want to. It's not like it's from an attitude of like, well, comic books suck, I don't see value and I'm not even interested. I could see why someone would get defensive over just like dismissing a whole thing like that. But like, if someone is eager and actually is interested and wants to be a part of it, don't make them feel bad because they're not like there yet, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So like, it doesn't matter to, I think like that analysis, whatever, could have been however much more in depth. But because I admitted that I haven't read every Batman and every Superman comic, that now all of a sudden I need someone to actually explain to me, like someone on that post explained to me, okay, well, you know, in comic books, Batman and Superman, they're, you know, they're all sorts of iterated in different ways. And I'm like, I know. It's just like, I like literally even say that in the post, I think, like, and the most basic, like, understanding of what comics even are. Like, and I hate to even tell them like, guys, you're mansplaining me, because that word alone would just be like setting off the fireworks. That would just instigate more, you know, intensity in terms of like defensiveness. And it's, but that's what it is. And I don't know if they would do that to someone else, if its books are. And I even had someone really deep dive argue with me about what subjectivity is. And they were like, the movie's good for you. I understand like that anything that I discuss, regardless of what it is always going to be from my page, how I feel about it. Of course, it's going to be from my perspective, from whatever books, movies, whatever experience I have with this property. Of course, it's going to be from whatever limited perspective that is. That's literally what it's like for anyone ever watching, reading, whatever this stuff. Like, it's all based on your own perspective, what you've read. Instead of like viewing it like I'm going to take time to prove to them and to show them and to educate them and like get them to see it from my point of view. Like, my point of view is the only way, the right way. Maybe be like, okay, you could be surprised someone disagrees with you or sees something differently, but just take that opportunity to be enthusiastic about how you view it or why you love it or the reasons why you dislike it. But like when I make a post and someone, you know, it's like a well thought out post that took me like 3 days mulling over and it took me an hour to write. And I'm like, you know, very purposeful and like my effort and thought into it. And then someone just goes, that movie sucks. And it's like, cool.
That's a good transition into my t-shirt story, and then we can wind it down. So I'm at the grocery store this week. I'm wearing this shirt and I get to the checkout and it's a very small girl, high school. I assume that this is her summer job. I've never seen her in the store before. She's checking me out. And she's like, "Oh, Star Trek, huh? All right, Star Wars versus Star Trek. You have to pick one." And I was like, "I don't have to pick one." And she's like, no, you have to. Which one is better, Star Wars or Star Trek? I was like, I don't like one more than the other. She's like, no way. There's no way. You have to pick one with different flavors. And she's like, she was getting like really upset. She's like exasperated as a kid. And now that I'm an adult, I really enjoy the human stories of Star Trek. I can't pick one. And I was like, which do you like better? Star Wars, right? And she was like, yeah, I like Star Wars better because stuff blows up and it's funny. And I was like, well, what a conversation. So all that passion, and she's picking Star Wars because stuff blows up and it's funny. So I've been thinking about that ever since it happened. I'm just like, this is the world, man. This is where we're living right now. So what do? You know? Crazy.
Oh my gosh. Like, you'd think with that much like energy put into that, like,
right.
She's like coming on to you about that. Like, it's like, let it go. Like, it's okay. It's okay. I think this, like, it doesn't affect you. You think she would have had some like really detailed, like impassioned reason. Stuff blows up. It's cool. Yeah. Like, plot blows up. Some whole planets get blown up too, you know?
Yeah.
That's like, to me, that is such a kind of, it reminds me of being like a 90s kid where it's like Pepsi versus Coke, and like you had to choose. Or
Yeah.
like when the internet started and, you did those like chain emails on AOL with like your friends and family. And it's like this long like surveys that's like Pepsi or Coke, black or white, light or dark. And it's
Hmm.
like just the most basic one or the other. And you have to pick.
Yeah.
It's like, why? Why do you have to pick? Like,
Well, and now when
that's
I
why.
log into Twitter, that's all Twitter is now. It's like you can choose one, and it's like four things. And these posts have like thousands of engagements too. I'm like, is this where we're at as a society? We're just like, you're on a desert island, you have to pick one of these four things. I'm like, no, I can have all four of those.
Yes, like it's
Yeah.
just kind of a starter for a conversation. That can be just a fun way to get to know someone, especially
Right.
like rapid fire questions or whatever for fun. But when that becomes in a basis for like an argument and to actually get upset and to like demand someone to be like, no, you must choose. It's like, what is this? No, I
Right.
don't. Like I can enjoy both. And I don't know. To me, that makes you more of a well-rounded person because you enjoy both. And not to say you're not if you don't love all things. I'm not saying that, but
Sure.
I think if you're able to enjoy more things, that it just inherently makes you more well-rounded because you're just exposed to more. Um, so I don't know. Like that's just I do find it weird that people get so into like the one or the other kind of mentality. And
Hmm.
when people like ask that or they want it, like even lists, like I don't really like making best of lists, even though I do have favorites and stuff. It's just some people are just like so demanding on you picking and choosing things. And I just generally kind of stay away from best of kind of, I'll say less of an opinion and more of an
Hmm.
objective statement. Like
Yeah.
this is the best. And whenever you post someone with that, people will come at you like that. And eventual opinion is seen as fact, which again, if you are approaching it, challenging someone with that point of view, and like you're coming at it like, well, this opinion is fact, and my opinion is correct, and yours is wrong. Like that's bad. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just gatekeeping is weird to me because it just seems like like the bitterness that ends up coming out of having something done to you and there are injustices. It's not right to one way or the other. It doesn't matter who it's coming from. It doesn't matter when it happened. Like if it happened in the 70s, the 50s, the early 2000s, or now the 90s, whatever. It doesn't matter when it happened, who it happened to. Like bullying someone for anything, obviously, is never okay. But also, like to bully someone over something like a movie or a comic book, like to
Yeah.
me, that makes them the obvious loser. Like, how are you, like, you got nothing else going on in your life that you're gonna like pick on this kid because they read Superman comics? Go sign up for a sport. Like, you clearly got some aggression you need to be channeling 40 and channeling out somehow, like
Hmm.
it's just and I get the resentment that, like you said, you dealt with some of that stuff in school. And like I've dealt to that, not unfortunately not to the degree that a lot of people have. Because I did luckily was in environments in school where I mean there's assholes at every damn school. But luckily the schools that I went to, I feel were not didn't have the type of people I think that a lot of other people had to deal with. Like for one, neither school I went with had a football team. So it's like I feel, not to say, I mean, I am an Alabama football fan, so I'm not saying that fans and players are like inherent asshole bullies,
Yeah.
but I do, that's an obvious trend where the jocks, are the instigators usually of the bullying.
Hmm.
And so I feel like maybe not having a football team maybe helped me kind of dodge that because maybe there wasn't that sort of, dynamic at the school. But I mean, this is, and I brought like a picture out of a magazine to school just to like have on it. And I cried. I was really upset. Because this was before the internet, $2 or whatever from the grocery store. And so that was like my one picture out of
Yeah.
that I loved out of that magazine. I can't get that back now. So that's like, I mean, that is not on the same, and that's not the only, that's just a random one that happened to me. I mean, that's not on the same level as someone who may have had like their head dunked in a toilet and they're, you know, movie smashed or whatever it is,
Yeah.
you know, something. I mean, my picture was destroyed, but that's not even necessarily the same as like having a whole book or movie. Just, I say this having my own shit to deal with too. I mean, everyone has to have this hurdle, you know, past traumas to go over so they don't carry it on. It's like generational trauma. That's what that is. And that's can happen apparently in fandom too, where it's like it's kind of like sororities and like, you know, Greek culture in college. It's like hazing. It happened to you when you were a freshman, and now that you're a senior, you're on this power trip sitting at the top of the mountain, and now it's your turn to do that, you know. And it's just this perpetual cycle that's continued for like no good reason. It's like, okay, well, if you were picked on in school of a community, be that start of a conversation. Don't be the person standing there, be like, well, I was picked on. So random person I just met a year ago that entered my life now, I'm going to judge you on this past experience that happened to me 20 years ago, I think, because
Yeah.
now you're putting all that on them. And it's like, hey, I just made a post about Batman versus Superman. I didn't know your whole life story was going to be triggered by this when I made the post. And it's like, now you're having to like defend yourself. It's like, no, just be part of, come on into the conversation. Like, no one's excluding. We don't have to have that word. And when we were in high school, you said liking Wonder Woman was gay. Like, I get that frustration, especially if it's like someone specific, you know, like, you know, some dickhead in high school, and now he's wearing the Wonder, you know, that specific thing. I would get that.
Let's wrap this up. Do you want to promote anything? Do you want to tell people where they can follow you and like what I will have set this up before, like I'll do an introduction for this, telling people who you are. But I mean, 1931 Productions, we didn't even talk about that. And like you work in movies, you're living the dream, right? Like you're working on film sets.
Yeah. I mean, you know, if going to bed at like 6 a.m. is super thrilled to be able to actually be in this part of the industry. I've been in a lot of different aspects, and it's actually really fun to be on set in this capacity. So it's a lot, and it's tiring, and it's crazy, but it is fun. And as far as 1931 goes, got Instagram, Roll Tide 1931. I'm on Facebook, but basically we just make films that we want to make. Mainly horror. But I would say even kind of some, I don't know, niche horror like sounds up its own ass, but like I wouldn't say, I would say horror based off of like specific inspirations for us. So I don't know if that would count as like mainstream, or if it would seem kind of a little more indie. I mean, it's indie in terms of budget, that's for damn sure, because it's just coming out of whatever we ever make is coming out of our wallets, you know. But yeah, it's just I love all sorts of movies, and I like to put that. And honestly, life has been so crazy. We haven't done a lot of new things recently. We did a music video for a friend for a heavy metal music video, which was really cool. Because it was actually his whole album is based off of, he's got like a track inspired by Manhunter, movie references and stuff. And so he asked us to do his music video because he thought, well, that's marrying, you know, the movies and the music. Y'all love metal. We're big metal fans and we love movies. So he was like, hey, come do my music video. That's literally like our vibe. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to check any of that out, and we're always trying to like get back into it, but you know, life's crazy, man. So it takes a lot. That's why I respect movies a lot too, just on a basic level. Like, even if I think the movie sucks, I know it took a lot to make that movie. So I have at least some level of respect for any filmmaker, even if I think their film is like a team of people, took time and energy. And there's just like some little base level of admiration longer. But that's basically, if you want to check us out, you can find us there.
Do you want me to link to your Facebook page and other places like that? Is that okay to do? Or do you want me to
totally.
not? Okay.
That's cool.
Well, thank you
really
so much.
You.
I'm going to say goodbye to you after we finish. I'm going to finish the recording and say goodbye to you, but I do want to thank you here on the recording. Thank you so much for this. This was so much more than it's a challenge, right? Because we all are capable of gatekeeping. We're all capable of maybe not being the best shepherds of what's out there. And this is something we can be thinking about so that we are better, so we more welcoming and be a better community. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was so much fun. You definitely gave me some pep in my step for today. So now I could like go on the rest of my day, not being like totally zombified.
So, right, there's so much to talk about. There's so much. I mean, I said it was a meal, and I mean it. Like, I took so much away from this conversation. It woke me up to some things that I was doing that I don't want to do. It's going to stay with me because I want this to be a welcoming place for lots of different people, for different opinions. I just think, the idea of having to adapt. If my generation of fan does not adapt, I don't know what the next 10, 20, 30 years looks like. I mean, it really feels like it is going to go on without us. We can be a part of it, or we can watch it pass us by. And I want to be a part of it. So, Nadia Robertson's links, I put all her links in her social to help this channel. You can rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you can give the thumbs up. You can subscribe. You can leave a comment. Those 3 things are the name of the game when it comes to engagement and encouraging visibility on these algorithms and these platforms. I will mention that Serial at Midnight does also have a Patreon page. We've got over 150 videos that have been building over, I think, about 4 years. That I try to put up a new video, usually once a week is my goal. I don't always hit it, but I've done 5 Q&A videos just for Patreon. So that's really valuable. I appreciate you. Take care, guys. Let's continue the conversation. Thanks to Nadia Robertson. Until next time, I will catch you later.